Hello, Fairly Secret Music Group. This is David. It's been a little bit. I am here to talk to you about albums or bands that I thought got overlooked in the thrash genre. So, first of all, I will talk to you about the Big Four. The Big Four had some great albums. I'm just going to let you know what my favorite ones by the Big Four are. Anthrax, Among the Living, and Spreading the Disease. Megadeth, Killing Is My Business, and Peace Sells. Slayer, South of Heaven, and Seasons in the Abyss. And even though it doesn't have bass on it, and Justice for All, and Kill 'Em All. One day, they will start loving music again and want to remix this album, and I hope they never let Lars or James near that goddamn mixing room, because Lars ruins everything. And I can't believe they would mix Jason's bass out. We will get to Jason in a little bit. First band I want to talk to you about is a local band called Powermad. They're from Minnesota. They're still active. They did an album a few years ago that was okay. It just really was kind of a different band. This album is very thrashy, but very technical and not death technical or like Dream Theater technical. Just, it was a little bit more thought out, I guess. Less hyperactive than some of the thrash bands in the late 80s. This came out in 89, and this starts out with a song called Slaughterhouse, which was also featured in David Lynch's Wild at Heart. Apparently he was a big metal fan back then. Joel's vocals on this stand out, and most of the vocalists that I'm going to let you know about stand out a lot different than, say, the Big Four vocal-wise, except for maybe Joey. Joey always had a very melodic singing voice, whereas James and Dave and Tom did not. Joel did a lot of high screamy stuff, and that's why I loved them, aside from the amazing playing. One song you may have heard was Nice Dreams. The video is atrocious. It's so bad, but the song is amazing. And as I said in other videos, all of the stuff is there out on YouTube for you to listen to. I don't play any samples because I don't want to deal with copyright stuff. Oh, my cat's down here. They also had a song called Return from Fear, and that had a portion of the bridge which was in 7/8, and back in the day I just loved bands that played in odd times, you know, like Fate's Warning and Dream Theater and Thought Industry and stuff like that. This album is probably pretty accessible for most people, especially people who like Anthrax or the more melodic singers. People who like Tom Araya or even Dave Mustaine might not like it as much, but the guitar playing and the drumming and the bass playing, the vocals, everything on this is an amazing album. I don't think there is a bad song on this album, and that is all I'm going to tell you about that. Another band that I think were overlooked was Metal Church. Not so much this era. David Wayne was the singer at the time. He went on to be in a band called Reverend, which Reverend ended up having the singer, I think his name was Mike Howe. No, sorry. Reverend had the band who used to be Heretic, and Metal Church ended up getting Mike Howe in as a vocalist after this album. The Dark is actually a pretty decent place to start. The first Metal Church album is okay. This had the song The Dark on it and a ton of bricks, which was fantastic. But after David Wayne left, they got Mike Howe in, and he kind of sounds like David Wayne, but a bit more melodic. And the big hits on this were Fake Healer and Badlands. They were really shown quite a bit on MTV, I believe. I never had cable, so but those are the two. If you're gonna check them out, check those two out. And the song Rest in Pieces, sorry. They also had a follow-up called Human Factor, which I haven't listened to a ton of. It took me quite a long time to find that, but that one is also great too. Next band is Voivod. And so Voivod's Killing Technology really is kind of where they started getting into more melody, more slower, not super slow, because they're still pretty much a thrash band. And what really is the definition of thrash anyway? But this album had a song called Forgotten in Space, which started the whole kind of change to more melodic, kind of progressive thrash, if there is such a thing. Dimension Hatros is where they really started shining, especially the song called Experiment. Has this part that's da 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 dun da 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 dun dun da 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 dun da 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 dun down, and that really got me excited the first time I heard that, because that was exactly what I wanted Voivod to sound like. The next album ended up being Nothing Face, which was basically that Experiment song put to a whole album. You know, it was like everything I loved about that song was on this album. And this actually took me a while to get into. Actually, Voivod were a band that I didn't like at first. I had heard Astronomy Domini, their cover of the Pink Floyd song, and I liked that, but there was something about Snake's voice. That's right, their singer's name is Snake. And once I got into them, this became my favorite album. Strangely enough, I got into them listening to Angel Rat, the album that their bass player Blackie, they all had fake names. They had like Snake, Away was the drummer, Piggy was the guitarist, and Blackie was the bass player. So he had left after this album, and I don't believe he liked the direction they were going. But the strange thing is, this was produced by and recorded by Terry Brown, who was Rush's main producer in the 70s and 80s and stuff. I think this is a phenomenal album. It's a little bit more laid back, less thrash, more of their Pink Floyd influences, and such as, I didn't really, Angel Rat, and None of the Above, and Nuage Fractal, I think it's pronounced. Those are really where they hit their Pink Floyd inspirations. The last album with Snake for a long time. After this album, The Outer Limits, they did 2 albums with a guy named Eric Forrester, who played bass and sang, and he was more of a yeller, screamer kind of thing. It went back a little bit to, how they kind of were in the beginning. So it took elements of Nothing Face, or a little earlier, maybe Dimension Hatros, and had a more gruff vocalist. Like if you took Phil Anselmo and had him sing for Voivod. This is one of my favorite Voivod albums. It starts out with Fix My Heart, and it has the song Jack Luminous, which is, how long is that? 17 minutes long, and it has so many amazing parts, and they said they would never play it live because nobody would want to sit through that. Well, I would have loved to sit through that. So, unfortunately, I've never seen Voivod live. I forgot to see them when I was on a guest list around the time my back was going out and way back on this tour with, I believe, Damn the Machine, which was Chris Poland's band, opening up for them. I decided I wanted to hang out with some girl or something like that, and I just totally blew this concert off. I also blew the King's X Dogman concert off too that same year. What a fool. Overkill. So Overkill had a song called Fuck You, and they were just like a weird sensation. I don't know. It was, I don't know if it was a hit, but We Don't Care What You Say, Fuck You was the chorus. And back in 88, 86 or whatever, that was really frowned upon by the PMRC and stuff like that. By the time I found out about Overkill, they had done this album, which is Taking Over, and the big song on this was In Union We Stand, which I had heard on a metal show. This album is fantastic. It's probably the best of the original group, and there's a bass part on here that goes and 4 albums later, Dee Verney uses that as a little interlude bass part on the album Horrorscope. What made these guys stand out was the bass. This was the thrash band. This was kind of like the Iron Maiden of thrash bands, where the bass player was a huge driving force. Their singer had a very unique voice. His name was Bobby the Blitz Ellsworth. I mean, it still is. He's not dead. So you had Bobby the Blitz Ellsworth. You had a guy named, I think, Rat Skates was their original drummer. You had Dee Verney, which I think his real name is Bobby too, and then you had Bobby Gustafson. So you had 3 Bobbies. I might be wrong about that Dee Verney thing, but I kind of think that is true. I don't know where the heck I heard that. So this album was the first one I heard, and then Under the Influence came out. They got rid of Rat Skates. I don't know if it was him leaving or them kicking him out, but they got a guy whose name was, always in quotes, Sid Falk. Well, turns out Sid actually played in Paul Di'Anno's Battle Zone, and his real name is Bob Falk. I think it's Falk, but I always called him Sid Flack. His drumming was amazing. He just brought this band up a notch, or 20. And, the song Shred, Hello from the Gutter was a big hit from this one. At this point, they were doing the trilogy. This was the third part of the Overkill trilogy. Every album ended with a song called Overkill, and the end of the first song was the beginning of the second, and the end of the second was the beginning of the third one. They did do that kind of on their fourth full length, which I think is their best album. It's called Years of Decay. And Years of Decay starts with an amazing song called Time to Kill. And then it goes into Elimination, which I told my doctor if he ever tells me I have a terminal disease, I'll have to say, you told me too late, what's that coffin weed? And he has to say, fatal, you're shitting me. Second opinion is what you need. Anyway, this has a couple really slow things like Skull Crusher on it, and Who Tends the Fire, and Years of Decay. They actually were pretty bold having Years of Decay and Who Tends the Fire like right next to each other. Those are very slow building, almost power ballads. And the album ends with a song called Evil Never Dies, which is the best Overkill song ever. I love it. It's so great. So Bobby Gustafson left after after Years of Decay. And then we get Horoscope, which I believe actually has two different covers. I think... No. I don't know. I think this was the actual cover. This song, though, starts out with Coma and has the song Horoscope. The only bad part on this is they do a cover of Frankenstein. Don't do a cover on your album. That's just, I hate it. I just don't like covers, especially by a band that is so good. Don't waste my time with a cover. That's just silly. The next band is Forbidden. Forbidden had an album before this. Let me grab it. Called Forbidden Evil. And I thought this album was pretty good. It had some like Chalice of Blood and Through the Eyes of Glass. The thing with Forbidden that really made them stand out is they had a singer who could actually sing and scream, but yet do the kind of what you would think of as a thrash singer. His name was Russ Anderson, and he was just fantastic. Again, he probably still is fantastic. He's not dead. I just make these guys sound like they're. But Paul Bustoff was on this album, and he was so unique. He did a lot of closed hi-hat, which is really weird for a guy playing a lot of double bass drumming, and it just made this album sound so tight. And then Russ would do these huge screams that I'm not even going to attempt to pretend to do. If you want to check them out, I highly recommend the songs Infinite and Out of Body, Out of Mind. Those were the highlights on this album. I actually saw them on this tour, and he was amazing. They then, I think, got dropped from their label, and then they got onto this, like, Fierce. They were on Fierce, which is like a British label, I think. This album, Distortion, came out in 96 or 95, and I saw them on this tour also, and they were amazing. And Russ had a huge red beard, and he probably had a huge red beard too. He was just amazing. And me and my friend Mike went to that, and he just kept on calling him Uncle Russ all night long, and we were just laughing our heads off. Distortion, again, is a great follow-up to Twisted into Form. The drummer on this, who took over for Paul Bustoff, because by the time this album came out, he had already recorded Divine Intervention by Slayer. He was the guy who took over for Dave Lombardo. And as much as Dave Lombardo is great, I just really like Paul Bustoff's drumming better. I kind of think he had been wasted in Slayer. I know it's blasphemy, but considering how good he was on those first two Forbidden albums, he's also, I believe, played with Testament, who I'm not a big fan of. But anyway, they followed that up with the album Green, and this was actually in the 90s still. This was 97, and this saw them getting really very down-tuned, and not nu metal, but just very sludgy thrash. Russ still sounds great. They all still sound great. The songs on here are a little bit different than the first three albums, but still very good. This is the one that I haven't listened to a ton. It's Omega Wave. It actually came out in 2010. I saw them again on this tour, and Russ was still pretty good vocally. You could tell he was straining a bit when he was trying to hit those higher notes, but for the most part, he was really still good. And that's it for them. Here's a weird one, Hellstar Nosferatu. I didn't know whether I should put these guys in the bands. I want to do a video where I do bands that have like high-pitched singers like Queensryche, Fate's Warning, Dream Theater, all that stuff. But I thought, this album is such a thrash album. And this is my old crappy copy that I got in 1995, and I believe I paid $40 at the time for this because it was so impossible to find. I got it the last day I worked at this record store. This guy ended up finding two copies. I got one for me and one for this guy named Carl that I used to know. At one point, I wanted to do an acoustic version of the first half of this album, which is all about Dracula, and with just two guitars, acoustic guitars, and vocals. And that was it. That would have been just bizarre. But as I said, the first half of this album is the story of Dracula, and then they go into the second half, has like just random songs that are amazing, are so amazing. And the weird thing about this band is they had an album called Distant Thunder before this, which was pretty good. I liked it. There's a 2-disc version that has this and Distant Thunder. I believe they're remastered. I have that, but it's weird it folds out and it's hard to get this image up. So that one is worth checking out too, but this is really the pinnacle of Hellstar's stuff. They've had a bunch of stuff after it. James Riviera, who filled in for Eric A.K. in Flotsam and Jetsam, he is the singer of Hellstar, and he was also in a band called Destiny's End, I believe they were called. He's an acquired taste, and on this album, he fits the music and the subject matter perfectly. I love this. Flotsam and Jetsam. The band Jason Newsted left to join Metallica. Was it a smart choice? Considering there's no bass on And Justice for All, No, it wasn't a smart choice. Considering how much money he made, yeah, it was a damn good choice. So, if you have not heard this album, Jason Newsted's playing is amazing. It's the best playing I think he's ever done. And he actually went on when Snake came back to Voivod. He was in Voivod for 2 or 3 albums. Unfortunately, those are just okay albums. Excuse me. I've been up all day. Doomsday for the Deceiver is not the best Flotsam and Jetsam album. I wanted to call him Fate's Warning there for a second. It is not the best Flotsam and Jetsam album, but it shows off how amazing Jason Newsted was on bass, and probably still is. He just really didn't have any place except for And Justice for All to shine. He was good on the Black album, and I never listened to really anything after that. And the biggest reason I love Flotsam and Jetsam is the singer. I thought Eric A.K. stood out over everybody else. I honestly think Flotsam and Jetsam should have been part of, the Big Four. Or if there was an extended Big Six or Big Eight, I know people would have Testament be in there. I think Flotsam and Jetsam deserved to be in that because they wrote great songs. And they always had great guitarists, great players. This album, was followed up by No Place for Disgrace, which had Troy Gregory fill in on bass. Not fill in, he became a full-time member. Troy Gregory, after this album and then the follow-up, left to join Prong, and I think that was a silly move on his part, but, what are you going to do? At least Flotsam and Prong is still together, but they were never anywhere near Flotsam and Jetsam caliber, in my opinion. No Place for Disgrace. The only bad thing on this album is their cover of Elton John's Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. Again, don't put a damn cover on your album. It just seemed out of place and very unnecessary. This starts with the song No Place for Disgrace, which is kind of shown right here. Let me show you this without a cracked case. It's basically about a guy who is committing suicide, and his friend, noble companion by his side, lifts the sword to help him die. Then there's Dreams of Death, Any Terror. I believe Any Terror or Dreams of Death have a part where they stop, all the music stops and they just yell fuck. And they re-recorded this album, I believe, because they can't get the original tapes back to remix or something like that. I don't know why they would redo this album, because this was made in when was it? 1988. So what is that, 30 years later? I think the remix or the re-recording was done a few years ago, but close to 30 years later, you're just not going to have that kind of vocal range. And he had an amazing vocal range. He still sounds really good still today, but of course, you just can't hit those huge high notes like you can when you're 20. This album was, I think, their best album. And this is called When the Storm Comes Down. Very unfortunate album cover. It's just so atrocious. But this had Master Sleeps, which man, that is amazing, and I wish this album was remixed, and I believe the whole band wishes this album was remixed. I think it's a good mix and a good remaster on this version, but it would be nice to just have those kick drums a little bit more, I guess, present, or they're slightly buried, just slightly buried. But I wouldn't want them to sound like "And Justice for All" kick drums or something like that. They had a song called "Suffer the Masses," which was a video that got some recognition. I remember hearing it on the radio when we had a local metal thing. There's a song called 666, which is the number 6, the word 6, and the Roman numeral 6. Is it as threatening as it may seem? What was there was a song basically about inoculations for the benefit of all mankind, and talked about his skin turning green and scaly, and this was just an amazing album, and I think it got totally overlooked. I believe it came out in 1991 or something like that. I don't know it. This is the remaster, so it doesn't have the information. So, some things for you to listen to if you like thrash but are tired of the big 4 or the big 5 if you include Testament, which I don't. Everything is out there for you to listen to, but if you like it, go buy it, I guess that's all I want to tell you.